Hello there, this is Amarah's Rabbitry, and today we're building a large 24 by 36 cage without any dividers, and I'm planning to use it for large breeds like Californians and things like that on litters. Today I already have all my pieces pre-cut. I'll explain which pieces are needed. I already prepared that in advance. My main important supplies would be these J-clip pliers that I bought specifically from the supplier. J-clips, of which I have a small amount remaining. I think it should be enough for this cage, and that might be about it. Got some door liners to protect my arms when I reach in and grab rabbits. As you can see on that cage there, it has some protectors as well. I have my door latch, which is for a right side opening door. And then just in case I need to trim any edges, I have the normal wire cutter here as well. So this is actually my last cage to build out of, I think I've built 30 holes at this point. Some of them are joined and some of them are separates. And so I'm just gonna kind of show you how I do it and then show you some tips and variations. So for the cage that I'm building today, these are all of the pieces required. They're pre-cut, I cut them. We've got a door, which I can tell you the dimensions I do later. The door is really up to you, and one of the most important things to consider is that the nest box you use is going to fit into your cage, and that's why these doors are pretty large, because the nest boxes are pretty large. Then we've got two 24 by 24 sides. This is used on both the right and the left sides. And then the other four pieces are all 24 by 36. We've got a roof, a back, a front, and then a bottom for underneath the tray. The correction, you'll notice later in the video that actually one of those four pieces needs to be 18 by 36, and that's the front face, and you'll notice that as we keep going. So that's what we're working with. I'm gonna assemble these things and tell you a few tips along the way. So just a few tips right off the bat. The reason I have my other cage out here, other than just for a visual, is to help me remember what directions of wire I like to use. Some breeders aren't going to care, but I kind of like having a certain side inward and a certain side outward. That's something to think about when you're assembling. On top of sides, you want to decide if you want it going this way or this way for the 24 by 24 pieces. And same with the doors. And then it can just help make sure that you're consistent to have your other cages to refer to. And some of the first things I do is I kind of flatten out each piece, because these come from rolls, and it's easier to work with wire that's close to straight rather than rolled. And so I will kind of do this to all of the pieces. All right, and now I've got all of my pieces kind of flattened out a little bit, made them easier to work with. And now we can really get to assembling, and I can kind of explain to you the order in which I typically do that. So as I kind of start, I take the top and the two sides, and that's the first attachment that I do typically. I make sure first that the cage wire is the direction I want it to be. And then I also take into account there are some edges that are going to be less scratchy because they were factory cut edges. I sometimes like to plan those ones to be toward the front so I avoid any scratches. So it looks like I'll be assembling this way and then this way. And so then I'll go ahead and get the first one attached. So this is typically how I assemble the first piece. Kind of lean them up against each other like a teepee is in a way, and then it's always easier once you get the first one in. All right, so I got the first one's on. For an edge that's 24 inches, I tend to do 5. So I'll do one in the center and then in between the center and the edge. All right, so we've got our first pieces together, and then I'm gonna get the next side on. I'm gonna end up moving it like this to get the next side on. That's what I found to be the easiest positioning. Don't worry too much about the technique of positioning though, because you'll just learn what works over time. All right, so now you've got your shape for the top and sides, as you can see here. And the side that's facing you right here is actually the back. So I'm gonna do that part next. I kind of take and I flip it like this, and then I'm ready to put the back on next. Again, I'm referring to my cage next to me to make sure that I'm applying it in the same direction that I usually do. And when I'm talking about that, I mean that the cross wires, I like to have more cross wires on the inside, just so there's a lot to attach things to, if that makes any sense. So I usually kind of set this on here as I get my J-clips ready. I got my first corner on over here. And I like to get on the side corner as well, just because the cage wire can move a lot. So I'll put two up in this corner, one here and one here. So on these 36-inch sides, it looks like I do 7 J-clips per side, just to make sure everything's really supported. All right, so once I've got this back wall attached, I'm gonna proceed to get these side walls fully attached as well. All right, so as you can see, I've got the back of the cage complete and assembled. So typically now I'm going to swing it down like this. Next, I'm actually going to put on probably the front face. This is just my preference. You can do whatever's best, but I like to do front face next. And it looks like I actually need to trim this piece because I forgot to trim this one. This one I actually cut to 18 inches high to allow space for that tray. So I'm actually gonna go and do that right now, and I'll be right back. All right, so I got my front face cut. As you can see, it is narrower than the others. And this is what I'm going to attach next. I'm going to fully attach this, and then at that point, if you're going to be putting any dividers in, that's when I typically do and find it the easiest. But let's get this one on first. And I'd like to add that on the front wall, where it's only 18 inches, I end up using 4 J-clips instead of 5. All right, so I'm just checking in. As you can see, I've got the front, back, and sides all attached, which means there's an opening here on the bottom. And this is the time that I will use a divider if I want to, or a couple of dividers. And I can show you a little bit in the footage here of what that might look like. So if you're gonna be putting in one divider per se, you can put it, you gotta make sure you measure it out to the middle. And then you can use these different types of pliers for the different types of wire that you're using. For the walls and sides, it's really easy to clamp down on these C-clips that you see here with just a typical plier, and you have lots of space. But once you do get to the bottom, that part is more difficult, and you want to make sure you have good access to that area when you're doing it so that there's no tight spaces. And I use a needle nose and my entire grip strength to do that part. But yeah, so you can use these different types of pliers for these C-clips to install dividers, and I can show you a few different examples of that afterwards. So the next wire I'm about to install is this floor wire, and direction, in my opinion, matters a lot more on this floor. I find that rabbits are a little more uncomfortable when this spacing is facing up, if that makes any sense. So I always install it so that these more plentiful spacings here are facing up, giving more surface area for the rabbit's feet so they don't get sore hocks as easily. And I'm gonna go ahead and install this piece next, right at the level it needs to be. Just a side note, you definitely do not want to skimp on the J-clips for the flooring. It is most important that your flooring is well supported out of all the wiring. So make sure that, especially if you have heavy rabbits, you're not skimping on that. Now I have attached the flooring, and this is the point where you would want to make sure that your divider is secured to the bottom before placing on that final bottom piece, okay? Because this is the best access you're going to have to that, and you want it as secure as possible. I'm going to go ahead and attach this final bottom piece along the edges here, and then we'll get to the door and the finishing touches. All right, so there's that tray for you right in there. As you can see, we're off to finishing touches, and as you can see, I have my cage for reference here, just to make sure that my door sizes are all exactly the same. I just don't want any inconsistencies, so I'm gonna go ahead and measure on the front face where I need to cut out and how big of a space I need to cut out that's gonna fit my nest boxes, so you can watch that now. All right, here we go. We got my piece cut out. While these protectors are optional, they have saved me so many scratches from wire, so I do highly recommend them. There you have it. I'm going to zoom you in a little bit so I can attach the door. So as you can see, the door has got to be a little larger than the space so that there's overlap on every side. And I do about an inch of overlap on every side. So you can kind of see that it fully covers when it closes. I use 4 J-clips per door hinge edge. And then I use 3 for attaching this hook here. And just keep in mind that the direction of the wire on your door does affect how your hook is going to go on. I'm personally going to put it on like this, but some people prefer to have a little bit more room to move it around, kind of like this. Another tip, don't ever make your hinges too tightly closed because you need some mobility for that door to open easily. And now for attaching the door latch. And now we have our working door. You go ahead and push and open. And there you have it. And there you have it. These are 2 identical builds. Just a couple of extra tips. I ended up needing to apply more J-clips to the back wall of this cage because for some reason the wiring on the bottom was bunching up a lot more. Sometimes that can be a sign of mismeasurement, which is easy to do on those bottom pieces, but in this case it wasn't. It was just kind of positioning, and so I put a lot of extra J-clips in to make sure it wasn't bunching and feeling very supportive. And next, I'm going to just show you a few of my other builds in the shed so you can kind of see some variations of different types of cages, and then check out those barriers in case you want to use those. So here's my shed. As you can see, I've got a lot of builds in here. The one that I built today was actually the last one I had left to assemble, so it completes my collection, but I'm going to show you around. So I've got several of these. These are 24 by 36 with a single divider, which I feel is adequate space for a small rabbit on a litter, so like Polish or something. And I think they'd work for some grow outs too of bigger rabbits as well. And then I've got lots of single-use singleton spaces here for Polish. This is a 24 by 36 with 2 dividers. And as you can see, they are well attached with C-clips on every edge. These are 24 by 24s, split in half, which end up being the same size as the 24-36, split in 3. And then over here, I've got another of the exact size that I showed you, and the nest box that fits well in that door. And then over here, I have a 24 by 24 with no barrier for adult Californians, another one over there, some more singletons, and some more singletons. So you can really get creative with what sizing you want. Just make sure that you're sticking to something standard if you're using trays, so that you're able to order plenty of trays that are going to work for you. And then another tip for cage building is, even if you are not using trays or whatever, but you're using 1 by 2 inch wire, it's always best to make your cages to a measurement that is a multiple of 2 or an even number. And the reason for that is whatever direction you choose to put your wire, you won't have any issues with being able to connect it on all ends, because that could be a disaster. So this is how many J-clips I have left, and I started with about this much, so you can see about how much you'll be using per cage. Just another side note, typically doing one cage, one unit, whether it has dividers, no dividers, or whatever, usually the process of cutting the pieces and assembling the cage takes anywhere from 45 to 60 minutes per unit, based on my experience. So I want to thank you for coming along with me as I build my cage. If you have any further questions about cage building, feel free to ask them in the comments below. And if you have any ideas for future videos and things you want to see, let me know. Thank you so much. This has been Amarah's Rabbitry. I hope you have a great day.